As we're coming up to the holiday of Shavuos, so this is a very interesting topic to discuss and to unpack. And that's the topic of how the angels tried their level best to ensure that we would never get the Torah. And when I say that they sued us for the Torah, it's because they used a very intriguing legal argument to claim that the Torah really belongs to them and not to us. So what we're going to do over here today is, first we're going to look at a gemura. The gemura tells us about the interaction that happened between Moses and the angels when he went up onto Mount Sinai in order to get the Torah. Then we'll analyze what the legal basis behind that particular argument was. So that means we have to look at two sides. We have to say, what was the legal basis for the argument of the angels? And how do we find that Moshe addresses that issue? And the reason that this is all relevant to us, besides the fact that it's a fascinating study of Jewish law, is because it drives home the message of what it is to be a Jewish person living on planet Earth, and the amazing, amazing opportunities that we have, not only to change our lives, not only to become better people, not only to grow spiritually, but quite literally to change the entire reality of the entire spectrum of existence, including the highest possible levels. So let's start at the beginning. The Gemara tells us a whole lot of detail about what happened at the time of the giving of the Torah, and while doing so, it describes how Moshe goes up onto Mount Sinai, and there was some kind of a portal that when he gets to the top of Mount Sinai, it wormholes him into heaven, and there he is, he's standing in heaven. And as soon as he arrives in heaven, there's this intruder alarm that goes off, and the angels go crazy, and they say, Ma liloid isha beinenu. Why is there a person here? How does this happen? A human. Mele, if you want to tell me there was a soul of somebody who had passed away and their soul is in heaven, I think the angels probably would have been able to digest that. But here's a human in the flesh. What's he doing in heaven? They couldn't get their heads around this. So Hashem says to them, he's here to receive the Torah on behalf of his people who are back down on earth at the foot of the mountain, and the Torah is going to be given to them. And the angels go wild. Say, what do you mean? Chamuda genuza, this precious treasure that you, Hashem, have kept hidden, out of sight, out of reach, in the heavens for literally millennia. And you're going to give it to humans? You're going to give it to people? People who need to sleep at night? People who get distracted? People who have ADD? People who have temptations? You're going to give them the Torah? Rather, say the angels, share your greatness and your glory here in the heavens. Mo enosh kisis kerenu. What is humanity that they deserve any mention, that they deserve your attention? So there's this tension. You can well imagine what's going on over there. Moshe comes into heaven. He knows how powerful the angels are. He knows that one angel, in just a flash of divine inspiration, could completely obliterate him. And now the angels are saying, you don't deserve the Torah. Humans are failures. Why would we relinquish this great treasure that we have? So you can imagine the dramatic music playing in the background if this were to be a scene. And Hashem turns to Moshe and he says, you answer them. So first Moshe ensures that he has certain guarantees for his safety, that Hashem is going to protect him, that he's not going to get burnt up by the power of the angels. And then he answers the angels as follows. He says, tell me something. Let's have a look. What does the Torah state? Let's start with the 10 Commandments, because that's what's going to be announced to the Jewish people. So that obviously, in a sense, represents what the whole of Torah is about. Let's have a look over there. Let's see what it says. And then let's see if it's relevant to you. Firstly, what does it say in the Torah? I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of Egypt from slavery. Says Moshe to the angels, have you ever been down to Egypt? Have you ever been slaves? How could the Torah be relevant to you? How could it be talking to you? This is discussing people who went through slavery in Egypt. Come, let's see, what else does it say in the Torah? It says in the Torah, you shall have no other gods besides me or before me. Says Moshe to the angels, do you live amongst pagan nations who are worshipping other gods, that this is even a conversation, it's even a discussion? Do you even know what another god is? Is it part of your vernacular? Torah is not relevant to you. And so he went step by step through the entire exposure of why every mitzvah is not relevant to the angels. Do you have parents? It says you have to honor parents. Do you have parents? It says don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Do you have a yetzer hara that you would ever be attracted to do any of these things? Don't be envious. Do you experience the experience of envy? So he makes it very clear to them that the Torah is not for them. It was never intended for them. It might have been in safekeeping in heaven for a period of time, but that's not the objective. And the angels have no choice but to acknowledge that this is true. And they have no choice but to give their blessing to the Torah being given to human beings. And it's a beautiful moment in the Gemara because it effectively shows us the wisdom and the insight that a human being has, which is even apparently beyond that which the angels have. And it sounds like a wonderful story. The only thing is that it can't be that simple. What do you think? The angels did not know what Hashem wanted. Had they never looked inside the Torah? Had they never seen that the Torah addresses the Jewish people? I mean, it's quite obvious. Let's be honest. You open up the book and it says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. Tzaves b'nei Yisrael, instruct the Jewish people. How did the angels ever fool themselves into thinking that they were the intended recipients of the Torah? It just doesn't make any sense. So there has to be more to the story. And in order to unpack what there is behind the story, so many of the commentators on the Gemara say that they had a legal basis for their argument. The angels didn't come out of nowhere and just say, we want the Torah because we're envious of the Jewish people, because as Moshe himself says, they don't experience envy. But they had a solid halachic argument to indicate that in their assessment, the Torah should never be given to humans. So let's do the backstory, explore an issue in Jewish law, see how this issue in Jewish law may or may not play out with regards to the Torah, and then see how we could possibly push back if the angels do have a good argument. So what could we say to defend ourselves against that argument? So the halachic principle that the commentaries say the angels wanted to use is an halachic principle called dina de bar metzra, which means the law of the neighbor, or the law of preference to a neighbor. So this is how it works. You have to remember, of course, that at the time of the Tanakh and at the time of the Gemara, they were agricultural societies. Maybe it's difficult for us to relate to because we live in urbanized environments. But as an agricultural society, if you wanted to expand your wealth, so the best way to do so, obviously, was to expand your land. Because if you had a bigger portion of land, then you could grow more produce. And then obviously you could have a greater income. You could put more food on the table. So in the interest of a person's development of the assets and of their wealth, a person always wanted to have more land, a bigger farm. So now you've got two people who own the farms adjacent to each other. They own fields adjacent to each other. So let's, for the sake of argument, call the one Reuven and the one Shimon. Okay, so Reuven and Shimon are neighbors. They have fields next to each other. Reuven now wants to sell his field. So the halacha is that Shimon has first right of refusal to be able to buy that field, because the best thing for the expansion of his own farming interests is to have two farms that are next to each other. It's much easier to manage. You can put one fence around the two of them. It's easier to get his implements from the one to the other. It's easy to gather everything together to a central silo where he'd be able to... It just makes sense. It's definitely in his interest, should he want it, it's definitely in his interest to have two fields next to each other. So we say to Reuven, before you put your field onto the open market, first offer Shimon. If he doesn't want to buy your field, gesundheit, by all means, you can go sell it to anybody else. And the basis of Dina de Bar Metzra is a principle that we call Ve'asisa hatoiv v'hayoshar be'inei Hashem elekecha, that the Torah instructs us that we have to do that which is good and that which is upright in Hashem's eyes. So in other words, I don't owe the person next door anything, but it's the right thing to consider his needs and to give him the opportunity that instead of having to have another farm a kilometer down the road and to have to split his laborers and have to split his tools, etc., let's make life easier for him and offer him the opportunity to have a bigger farm right there. Not only that, let's say that Reuven did not offer Shimon the opportunity to buy the field, and he just went to a guy called Levi and he sells him the field outright. Shimon reserves the right to get Levi to leave the field, to cancel the deal, so that he could renegotiate with Reuven and get that neighboring field. In other words, not only is Reuven supposed to offer this opportunity to Shimon, if he did not offer the opportunity to Shimon, the law favors Shimon to the point that he could even cancel the deal that Reuven made with another client and give him again the opportunity to buy that field. So the angels look at it this way. They say, look, where is the Torah right now? It's in heaven, right? And what is the Torah all about? It's about spiritual concepts, which are the neighbors of heaven. It's our domain. It's our reality. You're taking spiritual value and you're going to offer it to the human world. But hang on a second, the humans live far. Surely, before you offer them the opportunity to have this great spiritual wisdom and value system, before you send it to a distant prospective customer, the law requires you to first offer it to the neighbors. We're the neighbors. We live in heaven. This is our place. We're the closest to the Torah. We have first dibs. We should have the opportunity to get the Torah. And if we choose not to accept it, go give it to Moshe and to his people. So that would be the legal basis for the argument that the angels put forward. Now, it sounds like a really good legal basis, right? It sounds like remember, everything that goes on in the Torah might play out physically in our world in one way, but it plays out spiritually in the spiritual realms in a slightly different way. The principles still remain the same. The principle is, if you've got something and you want to offer it to somebody else, you first have to offer it to the person who's closest to you, and the angels claim that they're the closest to the existing space of where the Torah originates. So now we've got to find a way to respond to that. And depending on which commentaries you look at, the various commentaries, there are 5 potential responses that we as the Jewish people could use to say, listen, angels, you've got a really good point, but it's not valid in our circumstances. So let's look at all 5 of those scenarios of possible pushback answers that we could give to the angels. Number 1. When the Torah speaks about Dina de Bar Metzra, favoring the neighbor, you understand, for very logical reasons, that this must be something which has to do with fixed property. In other words, it's quite logical. Here's Shimon, he's got a field. If Shimon wants to have the opportunity to have a bigger farm, then the fairest thing to do is to offer him the next door field, because then he could have a bigger farm. Whereas if we tell him, no, Shimon, go buy a field a kilometer down the road, we've actually made his life inconvenient for him. Okay, now he's got to schlep his tractor back and forth between the places, and he's got to keep stock in 2 different places. It's just going to make life more difficult. So because fixed property is exactly that, it's fixed. So that's why we prioritize giving him the neighboring property to make his life easier. Logically, this would never apply to something that is what we call metaltalin, something which is movable. So let's say, for argument's sake, you want to sell a watch. You have no responsibility to your neighbor to give him the first rights of refusal of your watch. What's a watch got to do with a neighbor? A watch is an item that could be purchased equally anywhere. The fact that I'm selling a watch doesn't mean that nobody else could sell a similar or even the identical watch. Same brand, same model. You could buy it anywhere else. I, as the neighbor, have no logical reason to have to prioritize you as the neighbor in order to give you the watch. So the law of Bar Metzra only applies to fixed property for logical reason, because you can't bring a field from somewhere else and now plonk it down next door. The field is wherever you buy it. Whereas you can buy a watch from somewhere else and bring it home. You don't have to go to your neighbor in order to buy the watch. So now, logically, Torah is not fixed property. Torah is mobile. There's no place where Torah is. Torah is a concept. You can carry Torah with you in your mind. You can take books with you wherever you go. In today's world, you can browse the internet and find Torah anywhere. So if the whole complaint that the angels had and why they believed that they should have the Torah is because they're the neighbors, it actually isn't a very strong argument, because neighbors are irrelevant to something mobile, and Torah is highly mobile. So that would be the first pushback against the angels, and that's suggested by some of the commentaries. Here's another suggestion. When we say Dina de Bar Metzra, that you have to prioritize the neighbor, that is if it's free market enterprise. In other words, I'm selling a field. I could sell it to my neighbor Shimon, or I could sell it to the guy Levi who's never owned a field in his life. So there's no compelling reason to sell it to Levi more than to sell it to Shimon. So therefore, the right thing to do is give Shimon the opportunity, because, hey, he's my neighbor. He has the opportunity, if I sell in the field, to grow his wealth. But what happens if I decide that I'm actually going to give my field to somebody as a gift? That's no longer the free market enterprise. That's a personal relationship. You don't give a gift to somebody unless you have a relationship with them, or they've done something for you that you appreciate so much that now you want to reciprocate and give them a gift. It's a personal relationship. Now, I don't have any responsibility to my neighbor that my personal relationship with my neighbor should be greater than my personal relationship with my dear friend, the family member, or with somebody who saved my life, and I decided I want to give him something in return. And so halachically, the principle of prioritizing the neighbor could never apply if the field is being given away as a gift. Because that individual's rights to be able to expand their field is not stronger than my rights to choose who I want to give a gift to and when I want to give it to them. Now, what was the Torah? We're about to celebrate the holiday of Shavuos in a few days' time, please God. What do we call it? Look inside our siddur. What do we call it? Zman Matan Torah. The day of the giving of the Torah, not the selling of the Torah. The giving. It's a gift that Hashem gave us. We don't pay for the Torah. So, sorry, angels, you have a very strong reason why you argue that you should have access to the Torah before us, because you're neighbors, but neighbors are irrelevant when the person decides to give a gift. And Hashem gave us the Torah as a gift. Now, the first two answers, we're going to look at, there's 5 answers in total. The first 2 answers that we're going to look at are very compelling, because they're very solid halachic basis. There's a solid halachic basis to say that a neighbor does not get priority to any movable item, and there's a solid halachic basis to say that a neighbor does not take priority over who I intend to be the recipient of a gift. The next 3 that we're going to look at are a little bit more esoteric, not fully esoteric, but they're a little bit more abstracted from plain black and white halacha. Even though the first one of them, well, all of them obviously have an halachic basis. They must have an halachic basis. Otherwise, you can't push back against a legal argument with a non-legal argument. So they all have a legal basis. But how we arrive at that legal basis is a little bit more abstracted. So first of all, we have a unique relationship with Hashem. We as the Jewish people have a unique relationship with Hashem. In one verse, the Torah tells us that we are like Hashem's relatives in the more generic sense. And in other places in the Torah, it's much more specific. We're considered Hashem's children. Now, the law is that if I want to either sell or give or however transfer my property to my own family, the same logic that would have said, give my neighbor first rights, obviously says, and my family have first rights even before my neighbor. So if I've got whichever particular relative it might be who wants to buy my field, they are absolutely first in line, and the neighbor is second fiddle. Because we are, by the Torah's description, related to God, not just related, but Hashem's children, the angels don't have an argument. There's nothing they can say, oh, we're the neighbor. Yes, you are the neighbor. And under different circumstances, you may have actually taken priority. But a neighbor will never have the rights to override family members. So we're Hashem's children. Sorry for you, angels. We certainly take priority. And the next 2, as I say, a little bit more abstracted. So we've got to just work out how the link works. Moshe is the person that goes up onto Mount Sinai and enters this portal into the next world, into the higher realm, into the heavens. And he's completely at home over there. If it had happened to any one of us, not sure we would have been as at home as Moshe is. But, Moshe is completely at home over there. It's no problem. He's in heaven. It's okay. And the reason for that is because there's a fascinating comment that the Torah tells us about Moshe. It tells us that Moshe was partly a man of God. Ish ha'elokim. That's how the Torah calls him, the man of God. Which basically means, the Midrash explains, he was partly in the human world and he was partly in the heavenly world. That means even while he was here on earth, he didn't walk the earth like we do, completely trapped in the perspectives of the human experience. He was halfway out of the earth. He was halfway in the heavens, even while he was here on earth. Angels, you're saying that you're neighbors to Hashem or to the Torah because you're in heaven? So am I, says Moshe. I'm also a neighbor. I also live part-time. I've got property. I've got interests here in the heaven. I'm a citizen of heaven. So I've got as much right to the Torah as you do. And the last argument is that the Gemara tells us, if you look in Parashas Yisro, which is the parasha of the giving of the Torah, we also are told in that same Torah portion that Moshe used to judge the entire Jewish community all day. That was his primary occupation until his father came along and said, look, this is not practical and you have to delegate and create a hierarchy. And only after that did Moshe relinquish the opportunity to judge every individual's case. But initially, Moshe was a person who judged every individual's case. Now, the Gemara tells us that any judge who judges a case according to the validity, the authenticity of Torah, is considered Hashem's partner in creation. And the law is that if I've got a property, I'm allowed to sell it to my partner, even if he's not a neighbor, before I offer it to the neighbor, because partners have a unique relationship already. So yes, the angels claim that they're the neighbors to the Torah, but Moshe is the partner to Hashem because he's a judge who judges appropriately, which the Gemara tells us is somebody who's Hashem's partner, and therefore he takes precedence over the angels. Okay, so to summarize, the angels say we deserve the Torah because we're the neighbors. We live in the spiritual realm, and that's where Torah comes from, so it has to be offered to us first before it's given to the human beings. And there are 5 possible responses. Yes, that is true if it was land, the Torah is not land. Yes, that would be true if it was a sale, the Torah is a gift. Yes, it would be true for ordinary people, but we're related to Hashem. Yes, it would be true if we weren't a neighbor, but Moshe is a neighbor. And yes, it would be true if we weren't partners, but Moshe is Hashem's partner. Now, these are all very beautiful answers, as I said, offered by various of the commentators on the Gemara. There's only one problem with all of them. One thematic problem with all of these answers. The Gemara tells us the dialogue between Moshe and the angels. The angels are pretty clear that they believe the Torah belongs in heaven, which fits nicely with the idea of we're the neighbors, we deserve the Torah. But there's nothing in the dialogue from Moshe's side that seems to say any one of these answers. Moshe does not say anything that hints at the fact that the Torah is not fixed property. Moshe does not harp on the idea that it's a gift from Hashem, and therefore how dare you tell Hashem who to give the gift to. Moshe doesn't speak of the Jewish people as being relatives to Hashem, which would obviously imply our greatness. He doesn't speak about us being halfway in heaven, or even himself being halfway in heaven, and he doesn't speak about us being partners to Hashem. Now, all 3 of those would actually speak about our greatness, and the truth is that Moshe's answer actually speaks about our weakness. We have a Yetzer Hara. We are prone to envy. We have been slaves. That doesn't sound like he's highlighting how heavenly we are, how much partners of God we are. So this is all very nice, but it doesn't speak to what the Gemara tells us. And unfortunately, that is sometimes what happens with people, is that people use the expressions, and they say, wow, look at that answers the question. You've got to analyze. Does it really answer the question? Does it really tackle the issue? Have you just kind of fobbed us off? Now, this sounds like a fob off because none of this is what's written in the dialogue as recorded in the Gemara. Oh, and by the way, just for interest's sake, besides that big overarching question, one of the answers suggested that the issue is that the Torah was a gift and not a sale, and the neighbor has no pushback against the gift. That's only partially true. There are different places in our Torah literature that refer to the Torah in different ways. Yes, at the time of Shavuos, we talk about the concept of gift, Matan Torah, that Hashem gave us the Torah, that's true. But we also sometimes talk about the Torah as an inheritance. Torah tziva lonu Moshe moirasha kehilas Yaakov. The Torah that Moshe instructed us is the inheritance of the entire Jewish people. And sometimes it's actually referred to as a sale. So when we look at the Torah as an item that Hashem has sold us, well, then we're back to square one. The angels seem to have a strong debate. So there's another explanation that is offered. The other explanation is this. Let's say that Shimon, my neighbor, has a field, and his field is productive, and he has enough food to get through the year. Why does he want another field? Because he wants to increase his wealth. Now, what happens if there's a guy called Levi, and this guy called Levi doesn't have a field, doesn't have an income? Now remember, the reason we want to give Shimon priority is because ve'asisa hatoiva yosher. You always got to do what is appropriate. You've got to be good. You've got to be considerate of people. Now, who should I be more considerate of? Shimon, who wants to be wealthier, or Levi, who wants to be able to put food on the table? So if that's the weighing up that we're going to do, we're going to judge the person who just wants to expand their wealth versus the person who needs to survive. Obviously, the person who needs to survive is going to take priority. So maybe that's the argument here. Angels without the Torah will be okay. They're spiritual beings. They're going to be fine. If we don't have the Torah, well, you remember that famous story of Rabbi Akiva when the Romans had outlawed Torah learning, and everybody said, Rabbi Akiva, are you crazy? Why are you still learning Torah? It's completely illegal. And he said, well, what should we do? We can't survive. We're like fish. We need the water. If we don't have the water, we don't survive. Whereas we say, Kihem Chayenu, the Torah is our life. So maybe that should have been the answer that Moshe would have given to the angels. Angels, look, we really get it. We appreciate it. You've got a very compelling reason why it is that you need to be able to have access to the Torah, because you live in heaven and you are like the neighbors and so on and so forth. But we need it in order to survive. So I'm afraid we take priority over you. And even though that's a great answer, once again, that's not what we find Moshe saying. He doesn't speak about the fact that we need it so desperately, although he alludes to it, because he says, well, look, we have a Yetzer Hara, we have these distractions, we have temptations, we feel envy, etc. So he's kind of implying that we need the Torah in order to help us. But he's not making that straight, compelling argument that without it, we're done. The truth of the matter is, there's something to this whole story that we haven't really analyzed properly. And it's pretty obvious when you think about it. It's obvious that the angels are not fools. What's Moshe telling them that they don't already know? Moshe telling them, have you seen what the Torah says? Yes, they've seen what the Torah said. Of course they've seen what the Torah said. Have you seen that the Torah says it's about people who went to Egypt? Yes, they've seen that it's about people who went to Egypt. Have you seen that the Torah says about people who have a father and mother? Yes. People who work and they need rest? Yes, they've seen all of that. So the angels are not fools. When they argue that the Torah should remain in heaven, they actually had no issue with the Jews getting the part of the Torah that speaks about the practical side. So tell the Jews they should be the ones to put mezuzahs on their doors and to eat matzah on Pesach and to make sure that they don't steal or murder or commit adultery. That's fine. Tell that to the Jews. There's another whole dimension to the Torah. It's what we call Nistar or Pnimius HaTorah, the esoteric parts of the Torah, the Kabbalistic, the mystical, the Hasidus. The angels wanted to keep that for themselves because that's where they really are the neighbors. They're the neighbors to the spiritual realm. So we're going to open up, for example, a book of Hasidus, and we're going to learn about 4 spiritual worlds, 10 sephiros, different kinds of angels, how they interact. And the angels say, what do you need that for? You need a guide to stay aligned with what Hashem wants, despite the challenges of the physical world. Here's your guide. Put a mezuzah on your door. Put on tefillin every morning. Give tzedakah. Follow these rules, and you'll be fine. You don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need all the deep spiritual insight. That's our world. You take that part of the Torah, and we'll keep this part of the Torah. And then that really, really raises a big question, because then what's Moshe arguing to defend himself? He's effectively telling the angels what the angels themselves are saying. Moshe says, yeah, but the Torah is speaking about people who went to Egypt. They say, yes, that part of the Torah is for you. Yeah, but it's talking about people who have to rest on Shabbos. Yes, that part of the Torah is for you. People have to work. But it says, honor your parents. Yes, because you have parents. It's relevant to you. Don't steal. Don't murder. Don't be envious. That's relevant to you. You take that part of the Torah, gesund to hate. So what's Moshe telling them? It actually sounds like Moshe is supporting their argument rather than rebutting their argument. So perhaps we're missing something that lies at the core of what it is to receive the Torah. And that's a big thing, and it's really important for us to know, because people tend to believe that the Torah is here to keep us regulated as Jewish people. It's got a whole lot of laws. There's a law for everything. There's a law for how you eat. There's a law for how to do business, how to get dressed in the morning, how to take a shower. Literally, a law for everything. And most people think, well, that's actually what Torah is all about. It's this great system to regulate Jewish life. Or people will say, you know what Torah is? Torah is divine wisdom to be able to help us to survive human life. So you've got to have that wisdom. You've got to have that insight. Maybe we're missing a core element of what Judaism is, of what the Torah is, of what mitzvahs are. And in order to unpack what that core element is, there's one other possible argument from the legal framework that we could use to debunk the argument of the angels that they deserve the Torah because they're neighbors. Let's go back. We've got Reuven who owns a field. His neighbor's name is Shimon, and Shimon would really, really like to buy that field when Reuven is ready to sell. And by rights, Reuven has to give first right of refusal to Shimon. But he doesn't. Instead, he offers the land to Levi. Shimon is furious, says, hey, the law's in my favor. Give me the field. Levi, be rid of you. I need this field. Levi says, yes, Shimon, you want the field because you want to expand your farming operation. I'm buying the land because I need to build a house. So in that case, the law is that because the yishuv, the settlement of people, particularly in the land of Israel, but human settlement is such a big issue, it's such an important consideration, it overrides the consideration of Shimon expanding his wealth. So if Shimon wants to have a field and Levi wants to buy land to build a house, Shimon cannot argue. Now this is really the answer. Why do we need Torah? We, people, humans, why do we need the Torah? Is the goal of Torah to become deeply spiritual? No. It might be a benefit of learning Torah. It's likely that a person who engages in Torah will become a more spiritual person. But is that the objective of the Torah? Resoundingly, no. Is the purpose of the Torah to create a whole set of regulatory protocols that keep us living Jewish life? That might be a benefit of Torah. But is that the purpose of Torah, to have a regulated Jewish society? No, that's not the purpose. It's a function of the Torah. So what is the purpose? Very famously, the Midrash Tanchuma tells us that the purpose of creation, which in turn will be reflected in the purpose of Torah, because obviously the Torah is given in order to bring creation to its purpose. The purpose of creation is because Hashem had the most innate desire to have a home in the lowest possible reality. Now, home is a very loaded word because home is not just a structure. House is a structure. Home means a place not only where I have shelter, not only where I go, and that's my territory, and nobody should invade my territory, don't trespass on my property. Home is where I can be me. I don't have to conform to everybody else's expectations. You know, when I'm out on the street, I've got to behave a particular way. When I engage with people socially, there's a certain social expectation. When I'm in the business world, there's a different business expectation. When I'm with family, there's a different expectation. In my home, I can be me. I don't have to put on a show for anybody. I don't have to conform. I can just be me. Now, the way that Hashem created reality including the spiritual realms, is that in every single realm, Hashem has to conform to a particular protocol that he has decided. If it's a higher spiritual realm, then the protocol requires more divine revelation. If it's a lower spiritual realm, the protocol requires less divine revelation, until we eventually come to this world where the protocol requires that Hashem should hide through the cloak of nature, and we shouldn't see Hashem in the world. That's how he's designed it. So Hashem is not at home in any facet of creation, because in every facet of creation, he's conforming to a particular set of rules that he's decided have to be in place. The goal, the objective of the whole of creation, the whole of life, and therefore the whole of Torah, is to make a home for Hashem where he wants to be at home. Where does he want to be at home? Not in the heavens. He dafka chose that he wants to be most at home, most revealed, most himself, specifically in the lowest realm. That is a house versus a field. Meaning, the angels, if they get the Torah, they'll have an amazing experience. They'll be exposed to tremendous divine energy, except that all of the divine energy that they'll be exposed to will be in the higher realms, which is not where Hashem wants it to happen. So they could make a home for Hashem in heaven, and Hashem would be exposed. Particularly, what was their goal? Their goal is, let's use the esoteric part of the Torah, because that's obviously surely the way that you're going to reveal Hashem in this world. Surely that's what it's all about. The more esoteric, the more spiritual, the more godly it is. So let's expose God in the heavens and they'll be amazing. Could they do it? They probably could. Therefore, they argue, we need to be able to make this home. And the Jews come along and they say, you can't. You think you can make the home, but you actually can't. The home for Hashem can only be made on earth. So therefore, Moshe is going to illustrate to the angels why it is that Hashem's home can only be achieved on earth, because wherever you can build a home, or whoever can build a home, is going to take priority over whoever happens to be closer in spiritual proximity. So again, if Levi is going to build a home, Shimon cannot argue that he wants the field any longer. If we can prove that we're the ones who are going to build Hashem's home, then the angels no longer have an argument against us. And that's what we'll see reflected in Moshe's argument against the angels. You'll notice that Moshe's argument pulls away from spiritual greatness. The angels' argument for them, their belief that they should have the Torah, is founded on the fact that they think we're in the most spiritual reality, so therefore the most suited to reveal Torah in this world. Whereas Moshe's argument is to say, but we, the people, are in the least spiritual reality, and actually, ironically, that's why we're best suited to be able to build Hashem's home in the world. So he's got to illustrate that to the angels. Remember that the objective is Hashem wants his home in the lowest realm. So who's in the lowest realm? Moshe says, let me tell you. Have you ever been to Egypt? In addition to the fact that Egypt is a country, Egypt is a spiritual construct. It's a spiritual construct of extreme limitation. It's where you feel this overbearing sense of, I cannot. There's no way that I could grow. There's no way that I could connect. Egypt is symbolic of the world as we know it. Because when you first engage with Egypt, it's a place where, who's God? What God? As Paro says, Mi Hashem asher eshma b'koiloi. Who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice? That's the perspective of this earth. Says Moshe to the angels, have you ever been to Egypt? Do you ever enter into, not maybe angels fly into this world and do certain missions and fly right out, but have you ever been a slave to Egypt? Have you ever been locked into this reality? No. So you're not part of the lowest possible reality. You can't build Hashem's home because he wants it in the lowest reality. And then he rattles off a list of additional proofs, each one showing if you don't work, if you don't live amongst pagans who serve idols, if you don't have a Yetzer Hara, if you don't experience envy, well then the Torah is not for you because you're not in the lowest realm and the goal is the lowest realm. In fact, Moshe says to the angels, I'll tell you something else that you haven't considered. You think that you, using your great spiritual abilities, are going to be able to create this home for Hashem in the heavens, and that's going to be great. But you know what's going to happen? Let's say that there's a created reality that at its lowest point is called earth, and at its highest point is some spiritual reality beyond where angels live. We'll call it, in the language of Hasidus, the world of Atzilus. So the angels are kind of in the middle. Let's say that the angels succeed in building this home for Hashem that Hashem expects to have in their reality, which is, let's just for simplicity's sake, call it the middle. So the lowest point is earth, the highest point is Atzilus, and the angels are in the middle. Now, of course, as soon as you do this, as soon as you make this home for Hashem, your immediate environment is going to be elevated to a far higher spiritual reality, a holier reality, a more divine reality. So what's going to happen is, you sitting in the middle, your reality is now going to turn into this home for Hashem. You're going to be elevated. The world above you, the world of Atzilus, will naturally be elevated as well, because that's how things are. If you lift something up, whatever's above it will be lifted as well, and you're going to leave the world behind. So you actually will stymie the objective. The objective is that Hashem should be revealed everywhere. It will happen through the lowest realm, but ultimately the goal is that Hashem should be revealed and at home everywhere, across the board. Now, it's a simple principle of physics. If you want to lift a load, you put in your wedge right at the bottom of the load, and you lever it up from there. So if you want to lift all of creation, because the purpose of all of creation is to reveal godliness in an unbridled way. So if you want to achieve that, the only way to do it is you've got to lift from the bottom. We're the bottom. If we can lift our world by following the protocols of Torah and mitzvahs and imbuing them with the esoteric wisdom that will help us to appreciate not only what to do, but why and how to do it, you angels will be elevated as well. You'll be exposed to godliness as well. In fact, and this is the real depth of what Torah is all about, because we're people and because we live on earth and because we're very impressed by anything that is more powerful, more advanced, and more intellectual than ourselves. So we're impressed by angels because we think, the angels are very advanced. They're very spiritually advanced. They're like, wow, I wish I could be an angel. And that's why when we want to give somebody a compliment, we say, you're an angel. And that's why in certain spiritual beliefs, they actually think that after a person dies, they become an angel. Because relative to us, angels are highly impressive, which might be true. But objectively, angels are really not any more impressive than us, and perhaps even less so, because in order for Hashem to create the realm that angels live in, Hashem had to hide the lion's share of his infinite self, which is exactly what he had to do to create us. So they're actually not much better off than us. In other words, they have more spiritual awareness than we do, but they're like the millionaire compared to us who maybe have a few $1,000, trying to see who's closer to somebody with infinite money. There's no contest. So yes, relative to us, the angels are great, but relative to what Hashem has to offer, they're no closer than we are. The only way you key in to Hashem's truth is you have to expose Hashem as he is, not as he shares. He shares X with the angels, he shares Y with us. Neither of us is keyed into who he is. By making our world into this home for Hashem, we allow Hashem to reveal who he is to all of us, not just to the people, to the angels as well. We call this, in the language of Hasidus, we call this Ein Sof. The ability to reveal the part of Hashem that has no boundaries, has no parameters, and therefore has no rules. Doesn't have to be in a higher, more lofty spiritual environment, has no rules. Hashem could be as accessible here on earth with all of our finite limitations as he could be in the highest spiritual realms. Now, in the argument that Moshe gives to the angels, basically he highlights again and again and again how we're at the lowest point of creation, and that's what counts. But there's one argument that he gives that doesn't give that message. He says, do you have parents? Now, there's nothing lowly about parents. What he's alluding to there is the concept of birth. The fact that one human can be the parent of another human. That a couple can bring brand new life into this world is as close to godly as you can get. Hashem creates something from nothing. And the process of birth is as close to creating something from nothing as you could possibly get. What Moshe wanted to show the angels is, you can't do that. Angels do not propagate. There are no generations. There's no Zeta angels. There's no grandchild angels. An angel is an angel. That's where it starts and that's where it's finished. Created by Hashem for the amount of time that Hashem wants it to last. It cannot create new, and we can. And that's what Moshe is telling the angels. We, through having the Torah, are able to create something new that has never existed. Revelation of godliness in the physical and the spiritual realms. You can't do it. You are not endowed with the power of parenting, the power of birth, the power to create something that wasn't there. We are. And so that helps us to understand that the greatness of Torah is not its wisdom. The greatness of Torah is not its spirituality. The greatness of Torah is not the mitzvah system that it gives us in order to keep us living in a particular way. The greatness of Torah is that it is the key to unlock Hashem's infinite essence to be experienced by us and by every dimension of creation thanks to us. And we unlock that every single time we learn Torah and every single time we do a mitzvah until eventually it's completely unlocked with the coming of Mashiach, and then we actually see it for real. So the holiday of Shavuos, which we're about to celebrate, is not just simply thank God for our heritage or thank God for our divine wisdom. It's thank God for our opportunity to do what no other being could do, to bring Hashem to the fore for all to experience. Please God, we should succeed in doing so and experience it soon enough.